Chester was the epitome of pathetic in most classical sense. It was not so much that he had no real life, but how he lived it. He had the same routine every day. He would wake up, get cleaned up, trudge his way through a mediocre job, and rush home to get ready to go out. He would find some hole in the wall bar and waste the meager wages he had earned trying to impress every woman he could find. When buying them drinks did not work, he would resort to gifts, all while flattering them profusely. It never worked, and he would always end up crying himself to sleep with his tiny little one-bedroom apartment. Now, Chester wasn't exactly ugly, but he had no real defining features either. He was slightly overweight and beginning to lose his hair. His glasses had always been a point of self-consciousness, but this wasn't his real problem. Chester's problem was he was extremely awkward around the opposite sex and tried extremely hard to overcome this. If his advances were rebuffed, he would try harder and eventually leave any woman in his presence scarred for her life. He gave off the stalker vibes to almost any woman he spoke to him longer than 10 minutes. He had no clue how to land a date, but constantly he felt the need to continue this cycle, despite how much he failed. In one night, as the bar was calling last call, he shuffled his way to his newest defeat and ordered his last drink. He sat at the bar upon sipping it, contemplating on the purchase of a pint of Ben and Jerry's on his way home to cry. A tap upon his shoulder drew his attention to the most beautiful woman he ever laid his eyes on. She had long, flowing dark brown hair, hazel eyes, and her proportions were that of the models he secretly indulged in his bathroom. He stammered, attempting to introduce himself, while his goddess simply smiled at him and trailed a finger upon his glass. He had no words, which might have been for the best considering his track record. She raised his glass to her lips, taking a sip before handing it back to Chester. He shyly took a drink of himself. His eyes were still locked on his new guest. If he had paid more attention, he would have noticed the tiny cylindrical object that now rested on the bottom of the glass. She leaned in, blowing gently to his ear before giving him a wink. He tried to steel his nerves and respond, but could only manage to nod in agreement. Then, without a word, she took him gently by the hand and guided him to the door and out to her car. Chester stumbling to keep pace, his adrenaline coursing through his veins at the implications of finally taking a woman home for the night. The car came to a stop in a part of town Chester was not familiar with, but he was too unnormed by this woman to care. He was guided up by a set of steps and through a hallway. The lights seemed rather dim, but he assumed it was for romantic atmosphere. The trip came to a close at the doorway. She had left him standing on the hall and simply gestured with a bending finger for him to follow. Chester stood shaking, his body not sure how to proceed. Sweat beaded upon his forehead, and his thoughts overwhelmed him with choices. A quick slap to his own cheek brought him back to his current situation. He couldn't just leave. He monologued to himself, and he took a deep breath, pushed away any reservations, and took a step inside the room. He coached himself within his head, assuring him that he could do this, and it was what he wanted for years now. So, what's your name? I'm Chester, he said, fumbling with his words and mentally beating himself up on not introducing himself first. Then his eyes fell upon the woman who had undressed herself and laid bare upon a mattress on the floor. A sly smile rested on her lips, her hands running across her silky smooth skin. She again urged him to her, a look of longing resting in her eyes. Chester was unsure of how to respond, his feet shuffling a bit under him, his nerves getting the better of him. He stood there for a moment just watching her, and eventually she curled over onto her knees, hands sprawled out upon the mattress. If Chester had not been preoccupied by this sight, he would have noticed that there were no other furnishings in the room. He would have also noticed that the windows had been boarded shut, and a light that dangled above him flickered erratically among the random drips of water that seeped through the holes in the drywall ceiling. He would have noticed all of this if his pupils had not been focusedly directed on the curved form that now lay before him. This woman began to crawl toward Chester, slowly, seductively, and inched her way closer. She pulled at his belt until it fell from the floor, and Chester could not resist it. It had been far too long since he had been with a woman. When her fingers pressed about the cloth near his zipper and attempted to undo the fastening, Chester's body quivered violently in action. He could no longer contain himself, finishing his undergarments. His face flashed red, knowing that any moment his new friend would be mocking him. He would hear her now within his mind, and the thought of it brought back thick tears to his eyes. He jerked away from her hands, quickly brushed to the sides of embarrassment, and turned for the door. He stumbled towards the exit, all while attempting to fasten in his belt. And when his friends rested upon the doorknob, he turned quickly to apologize, hoping to make up for the humiliation. "I'm so sorry," his words crackling as his eyes narrowed in an attempt to see her through his alcohol-blurred vision. The woman now stood wrapped in the sheet at the bedroom door, anger forming now upon her brow. Then, in an instant, her body leaped forward, dropping the sheet and sprinting towards Chester. Her hands clapped down upon the floor, and her gait became more animal than human. He then quickly rubbed at his eyes, his vision blurring more as the seconds trickled by. His body felt heavy, and suddenly he had to fight to remain standing. He leaned against the door, still fighting with the knob. Her skin tightened around her mouth as it drew unnaturally wide, and for the first time that night, Chester knew why she had not spoken. With those beautiful lips rested jagged, sharp razors of what should have been teeth, and what sounded like erupted through the hallway was nothing close to human. He cupped a hand over one of his ears, trying to drown out the guttural wails of whatever creature now pursued him, all while fumbling with the doorknob on the other. Chester only had a few moments before this thing was upon him, and he felt his body weak now. He had even trouble seeing the doorknob right within his hands. When the doorknob finally opened, Chester's body came crashing through, stumbling upon the landing down the steps towards the street. The commotion caught a homeless man's attention, who had made his residence across the road, and Chester soon found himself being helped to his feet by the men. He mumbled amid his tears, attempting to warn the man of coming down. His hand shook as he pointed towards the doorway he had fallen from. When he was able to form a word that came out almost a scream, "Monster!" he bellowed into the night before passing out. The man slowly walked up the steps, only to witness the most beautiful woman he had ever laid his eyes off, butt naked, slowly closing the door behind her. A laugh erupted from the homeless man before he turned back to Chester. "Man, how much have you had to drink?"
What's up, my pretties? It's the Lion Queen here. I want to appreciate you all for tuning into this video, and I do appreciate you guys supporting my video by giving this video likes and stuff. If you really enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you're new, ring the bell for notifications to when I upload so that way you guys will get updated for whenever I upload. If you want to follow me on Twitter or DeviantArt, feel free to leave a follow on those if you are interested in following me on those socials. If you want to support my backup channel, known as Ms. Dark Shigo, feel free to subscribe to it, as a link to that will also be in the About page section. And with that being said, and that being the case, thank you so much for watching, my pretties, and as always, please stay pretty.